is the Chief Sales Officer for the Americas at Creatio. In his role as CSO for the Americas, he is driving Creatio's continued growth on two continents. He's the man of digital transformation trends on low code or no code quick. And while listeners, without any further ado, help us welcome Mr. Andy Zambito. Hey, Andy, welcome to
Wow.
the show.
Thank you so much. I always love the introduction, Brad. I really appreciate you having me on here today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, we're very happy to have you today. And so, before anything else, Andy, tell us and our listeners a bit about yourself and your background, if you
Sh-
may.
Sure. I suppose I came here through a roundabout way. I had a few, I don't know if I'd say there were false starts in my career, but I was going down different paths. I was going to do a military career and I was going to do a finance career. And in my early 20s, I found myself with an opportunity where the part I enjoyed most about my work was in the financial world was being out talking to the clients and the leadership and what they were doing. And so I quickly transitioned over to the kind of sales and business development side and never looked back. So I've been doing that in a variety of roles from individual contributor on up, and I've had the great fortune of leading teams and building teams in various stages and sizes of organizations, and that's the kind of most exciting part for me. I think is the building part of feeling that you're chiseling your contribution onto the foundational building block of a company, which is mostly why I've focused on either startups or emerging growth markets.
Well, and it's or excuse me, and for the startup markets, is that also always something that you've been interested in? Because I can imagine it's complete like we're in a startup market, it's a completely different market from companies that have already established
It is.
themselves in their industry.
It is, and it's a different set of challenges. And the way and they're both wonderful and amazing. But for me personally, I think there's a lot of personal satisfaction and rewards, as I mentioned too. The challenge of trying to figure something out and then understand what's our go-to-market going to look like, and can we get the traction, the product market fit, and then how do you grow and scale that? It's a different set of problems and challenges about how do you do this continuously at scale and multiply that. But when I look back on a career, I want to be able to see that my contributions, my efforts really moved the needle and set some foundational framework, and that's just a big part of the personal building that I guess is inherent in me and my brand, because that's always what's attracted me to the different firms, right? I combine that with, I like joining organizations that are part of what I'll consider transformative wave movements in technology. And I combine that with, do they carry a message that kind of cuts across the grain of what everyone else in that space is doing or saying? I don't like to align necessarily with just another firm in a space and move with the flow and just try to ride the wave. I do want to have, if you're having sales conversations, right? If you're actually engaging the audience all the time, you want to stand out and you want to have something differentiated. At least I do. That is more meaningful rather than ours is a different color, ours is a different price, ours is that, but it's still the same as everyone else's. Clearly what you guys are doing in your space is net new, right? Is very different, and therefore you have that evangelical element of it, where you're educating as well as informing, and it's as if it's when I explain to young sales professionals who are getting into it, and they often carry this mindset of they're asking their audience this executive to do them a favor and spare a few minutes of their time to kind of hear what we're presenting. I said, if you do the other, if you're carrying forth that that new message that you truly believe is valuable and is different from everything else, that it changes your mindset as well. Now, when I engage in that conversation, I can believe, look, I know something that's super important and valuable to you. You don't know it yet. And so in essence, it's like we're going to do each other this favor, if you will. I'm going to bring something to you. And it's a different confidence, it's a different attitude, but it also generates a different conversation. So that's just some of the things that have attracted me in my career as I've progressed.
So very interesting. And I have a follow-up question on that. What do you know today that others don't? Based on your current business?
Well, I don't know if it's a current business. It's a lesson I've had to teach people because again, my profession is one of engaging on the selling side. Is I try to explain to folks it's not enough to be right. You can be right in every sense. Doesn't mean the audience is going to get in line with everything you've said. I could have the best product, the best message, the best value, the best price, the best team, the best everything, and they can still make a decision that goes a different way. And so it forces you to think about that discussion of how do I, I don't know if it's convince you, but how do I engage you in a way that that I can still connect with you. And it's not a matter of, well, if I just say the right pitch, if I just, deliver the right proposal, I should expect an outcome because, of course, this is the right thing to do. That's not how life works. It's not how relationships work, right? Personal or professional. And so that's just something. If you said, what do I know now that I didn't know in the beginning? Yeah, go ahead.
And why no code? Why are you so passionate about no code today?
This is I try to unpack. I have this conversation often because I'm growing the team rapidly, and therefore I'm talking to engaging a lot of candidates who aren't coming from this space. And so I take a longer way of unpacking it. Certainly, you can describe no code very easily and just say, look, in your personal life, you have kids that are building applications in Roblox, building worlds in Minecraft. If you lost your job tonight, by the end of the weekend, you could have stood up a website, e-commerce, drop ship, done all these things without ever knowing anything technologically, and you could have a whole business by in 48 hours. That's an example of no code in your personal life, but yet we don't bring that into the professional world. But when I try to unpack why is this such a significant wave movement, I really look at my career. And you say, if you think back when I got started, over 20 years ago, there was a lot of technology that was still being built and delivered in the custom software realm. Right. I want what I want. It's unique to me. Nobody else is like me. And it's my competitive advantage. I'm going to hire people to do this, or I'm going to staff up to do this. You certainly got exactly what you were looking for. But by the time you delivered it, your needs had changed. And it was a super costly model to either maintain or keep paying for, and had a real long tail of when you got there. So as a software movement, the market essentially shifted drastically to commercial off-the-shelf software, COTS software. But in that movement, the only real change over the last long set of years in most of my career has been the commercial delivery model of that. Are we doing managed service? Are we doing SaaS? But the actual software itself and the trade-off you made, which says, okay, I no longer want to do this custom build. I'm going to get in alignment with a vendor. That means I'm going to make my trade-offs are going to be, I'm only going to get maybe 70% of what I want today. And I have to really think smartly about my alignment with your roadmap, because if we deviate, I'm going to get less and less of this. And if we stay on, and my trade-off is it's industrial strength, somebody else is thinking about it, and I can call you when there's a problem rather than my own team. There's been no other transformational shift. Yet in that same backdrop, there's been Apple and the rest have created this mindset of apps, right? There's a proliferation of need for apps. So now we're in a world where there's 1.7 billion knowledge workers creating a demand for over 500 million applications. And there are literally only 25 million developers in the world. So as a supply and demand model, it's fundamentally broken. As a software delivery model, it's broken, and it's unsustainable going forward. And as the evidence of this is if you don't already agree with what I've just said, is look around at the last time you've tried to build something, the availability of the appropriate resources to do it, the cost of getting them, the time it takes to do that, and how hard, and the competitive market for their skills and talents. Combined with the challenges of always having to still do business on one side, defining requirements for an IT professional on the other, and all the things that are lost in translation. So fundamentally, it's a broken delivery model. So you have the emergence of low code, no code, and this is really, I think it's itself still evolving, and it's kind of deviating into two different areas, right? One area of focus is saying, well, we can help IT by being a tool set for IT, and it can kind of democratize their skill set and make them faster and more affordable. But that's still making it kind of an IT workbench tool and creating this thing where now they're just competing on everybody wants to have a tool, and whose tool has, which Swiss Army knife has the most blades, right? Who can do the most thing horizontally, because maybe one day I might need that function. That's very different from where I think Creatio approaches this, which is one of the reasons I get so excited by this, is because it's very much focused on use cases. So how do we solve actual business problems, not just be there in case not a solution in search of a problem, but you have an actual challenge in front of you, and looking at it in a way that says, well, how do we engage the business? Right. So your business analyst in the field, in the heart of the business, knows exactly what they want and need. They don't need to translate that to everyone else. And frankly, they want to move at a pace faster than their infrastructure will allow them. And IT has many, many more demands on them now that are, a CIO today is not just, can you keep the infrastructure up and running? It's, what are you doing to help us drive revenue? What are you doing over here? All while spinning plates, trying to do these other things. So we can solve multiple birds with one stone. Can you have the best of custom delivery? I get what I need and want. It's very tailored to my need. Can I have the best of off-the-shelf software, which is it industrial strength? Does it have governance? Is it supported? All of these things. But now, can I do it without any of the drawbacks? Can I do it faster, more affordable? And can I short circuit this translation gap between IT and business and say, no, look, these aren't two different groups. You can all come together and work on an initiative. So it's a long-winded answer, I know, but it's you bring this all together is why I say this is really, it's a technological wave movement about the change of how this moves. It's also a fundamental technical one, the interconnection of bringing tech and business together, where you actually now have the business driving the delivery rather than these two separated groups that will get there. So I just fundamentally think for the marketplace in general, the no-code evolution is inevitable. Gartner's made their prediction that 65% of all business applications will be delivered in a low-code, no-code fashion just in the next 3 years, which in the tech world is almost instantaneous. And so this is one of the reasons I say that I get so excited by the space and passionate.
So to summarize, right? I think there are two ways to look at no code, right? So one is where you're a business analyst, you have never coded in your life, and you say, hey, I know what I need to do. Let me just use a no-code platform. I no longer need those techies to do it for me. Then on the other hand, you have the technology guys that now have a tool to visually program, right? And
Yep.
You could look at it from two different angles. Would you agree with that?
I would accept we're not trying to kind of separate these worlds and disaggregate. While it is a different approach about whether you're just isolating around IT or bringing IT and business, and while you enable business to do this without nearly as much IT, we certainly don't want to alienate the IT audience from taking advantage of this. Because to your point, I mean, they have their own great value points they can bring. And one of the unique things we've done at Creatio is allow IT to actually be able to get under the covers and still do some things if they really want to, because that's one of the fears. I don't know if it's really justified fully, but the fear that by engaging a low-code, no-code platform, I'm not going to be able to do all the bespoke things that I really used to be able to do. So at least in our world, we want to allow that to still happen if needed and desired, but that the business doesn't need it. A prime example that many people can relate to probably is one of the solutions we deliver. We happen to have built on top of our solution industry-leading world-class CRM. And in many people's worlds, that's something that they all touch, right? Because most business challenges, many of them engage around how do I attract, acquire, transact, and service customers. If you ask most people in their CRM world, in the business, right, and the last time you wanted to make any change at all to your process, to your flow, to your screens, your fields, how hard was it? You'd usually get a laugh or a chuckle, and they'd say, "Oh my gosh, it was it took an act of Congress or an act of God, right? We had to get around the room, and all the hands go up as to why you can't do something." The analogy I give is, imagine you're driving into work and you have a brilliant business idea of any kind, and you say, "Okay, get everybody huddled around the boardroom. We're gonna hash this out." And the moment you start opening your mouth, all the hands go up about, we can't do that. It'll take too long. We X amount of dollars, or you can't even touch this thing. It's sacred to all these other groups that it's going to be impacted by. This is what we need to change if we're really going to be a part of the other wave movement that I think that we've attached to, which is we've all talked about digital transformation as a terminology for years. I would argue that most people, I'm fond of saying, they've been doing digitization rather than digital transformation, right? They've been taking their servers and putting them in the cloud. They've been taking their paper and making it electronic, but they haven't actually transformed much. And COVID has really highlighted for many organizations what it means to really transform. Go hit your new banking targets while not being able to open a branch. Okay, I got to fundamentally rethink about what am I doing, and I have to transform. And if you combine that with how competitive the marketplace is now, how easy it is for, in that example, a fintech to start overnight as just take a slice of your business. I'm going to start an overnight credit card business, and all the new college banking people that are entering the world can download it and never talk to anybody, not go through a whole long underwriting process and all the rest. That's disruptive to your space. And if you don't adapt and move quickly, because ultimately what differentiates organizations, and this is Andy speaking, but is their processes, right? If you especially imagine you're in a commoditized world, right? Whether it could be insurance or airlines or whatever it is, right? That seat is a departure from A to B, and it's going to take off at some value point. Why are the airlines valued differently, have different loyalty, brand awareness, all the rest? I would argue it's because of how they operate. What are their processes? How are they engaging in customers? How are they empowering and enabling their employees? All of this is saying that the demand for moving quickly, the demand for transforming, the demand for having that customer engagement, which often is driven by how much you have employee engagement, is forcing the world to rethink how they do things. And if you just put that in the context, as we go back to the previous point of the old software delivery model, when we say every company is now a technology company and software eats the world, what do you do? So I don't see, not just, I'm obviously biased because I work in this space, but I would argue, what is the alternative, to getting on this and moving towards it? In your space, it's probably similar in some ways to the outsourcing world, right? Because prior, you'd think, I have to hire all these people. I have to take this long time of going through interviewing. I have to staff up all these resources to do any job function that they're thinking about doing. And I have to have this core competency in-house to do it. It's a similar type of movement, I think, that you're doing, is kind of democratizing what you can do and how quickly you can move and how impactful it can be to your business with a different set of economics, a different timeline. And I think so in the kind of people world, in the functional delivery world, in an area where personal expertise that you operate in is the important commodity. We're, I think, in a similar way looking at it from a technology standpoint of how do you kind of democratize this technology away from it only being an isolated 25 million developers, to say, can we all play a bigger role in this and have direct impact on our needs and wants, and not get in the queue just to change something in my CRM, as an example. I know what I need, and empower me to do it.
That makes perfect sense. And actually building software, right, is pretty complex if you think about it, right? So on one hand, you have functional requirements, right? Like you say, use cases, I want to do this. But I think one thing that makes it also complex is the non-functional requirements, right? Considering, for instance, the scale you want to achieve with it, some certain UX components you want to achieve with it, whatever. Right. I guess and this is one of the reasons why I think there's still a bit of skepticism in the world, where traditional programmers think you can never achieve this, solve the same complexity that I can with hard coding it, if you may, right? What are your thoughts on this? Do you feel that no code, because I think a lot of people think no code is great for hobbyists, but will never translate to a proper business that needs to operate at a certain scale. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's just a fundamental misunderstanding. And as I mentioned, that's why we even will open up the hood and allow an IDE there for developers, just to take away that concern. Because again, this is not trying to do away with developers, and developers are not going to go away. And we have developers at our firm as well that have to build some of these fundamental pieces. But what you're doing is you're building fundamental, composable building blocks. We have customers that are large established customers that operate very complex businesses, who in some cases are taking our technology and completely transforming their business and using it as their new operational footprint, meaning we're going to replace all sorts of technology end to end in order to use this. You can't fundamentally say that's true at the same time saying it's not able to do all of these bespoke things. In fact, the argument that would be given for why some of these firms select us in that case is because we enable more. Right. So if you think about this, the way off-the-shelf software was historically written was, I build it, I own it. I have to know your space. I have to kind of get smart about that. And I am going to give you this kind of locked box of things to do. And you say, okay, well, it was purpose built for my industry. So you know this all well and good. Well, as I mentioned, what makes you different from anyone else if you're all using the same cookie cutter block thing? And what makes you believe that I, as an outsider developer, are going to know your business any better than you? But if I have built that framework and I've built that capability, yes, I can get you going and launched faster and sooner. But if I'm not empowering you with the ability to make it your own, differentiate, do the special sauce that is you, then what have I really brought? I've actually, I would say that the technology that's been delivered today is often at its core moved away from being enablement technology, and it's more constraining, meaning you can do it's within guardrails. You know, it's like Henry Ford used to say, you could have any color car as long as it's black, right? You can do anything as long as it's within my parameters that I've defined. And you'll find there are strange parameters in software, like, well, I want to use this field, but it only limits me to 24 characters and I need 25, or whatever it could be, right? And so, yes, some of these things are changeable, but it's still fundamentally the software envisioned by an outside organization that's providing it to you, versus giving somebody composable building blocks. If I argued to you that I could sell you a box of, I don't necessarily love the example, but let's take an analogy of Legos, right? If I sold you a box of Legos and on the cover it's, I don't know, some Star Wars thing, and you can follow my map and build the Star Wars thing, does that preclude you then from breaking that down also and taking those parts and building something completely unique in your own? Right? You have these fundamental pieces. And now I'm not even limiting you to what's in the box. I'm saying you can have any of the pieces you could possibly want. And as you build these elements, you've built a wing, a steering wheel, other things. You can reuse that, right? So you reuse that over and over again rather than I'm going to build it from scratch each time. So there's, I would say it's the opposite of constraining. It's the liberation of the IT and the business both to be able to do what they want, do it faster, do it more affordable, and frankly, to iterate. You know, one of the challenges with IT projects is that they get limited oftentimes by what's the ROI on doing this, and how big is the case, and how many people is it going to impact? Well, that stifles innovation, right? And the reason you have to do that is because the IT queue is so long, right? And the cost and time associated with delivering it is so long that we have to be really certain about what we're putting in our top priorities. Versus, can I be iterating and experimenting with some completely new process, with some, you know, you guys do a lot of, marketing outsourcing and all the rest. Like, marketing is a prime example of where we hear about A/B testing and taking limited groups and running experimentation. Well, if I said you can't do that, you can't launch a campaign unless you know you're going to get X amount of response from it, you would never do that. And you would never find these brand new areas. So why are we doing that in one aspect of the business and not the other?
And maybe to strengthen your point, that we are big believers of this. So back on, I think, January 23rd, me and my co-founder were having a beer here in Singapore, and we thought about the whole Mangtas concept. 10 days, so we started prototyping using no-code platform on the next day. 10 days later, we had I think 5 vendors signed up to our marketplace. And then 3 weeks later, we had our very first $2,000 project started, right? On an actual working marketplace. And we've only prototyped ever since, right? So we are big believers in everything you say.
No, that's huge. Well, I'm a believer in what you do, right? I mean, because for the same purposes. As I mentioned earlier, I've been at startups where I'm person one, right? Define the go-to-market and experiment, right? Well, all right, who is the ideal buyer? Which title is going to respond to all of this? And you really only have 2 ways to approach this. Do I hire and build out a team of business development people, and we're going to run all sorts of experimentation, but essentially at their expense and mine? Meaning, if we're wildly off, they're going to not be successful and they're going to be frustrated and not make their incentive compensation. I'm going to be burning dollars and benefits and all sorts of things committed to a program that may be inaccurate. If I'm hiring a sales team and I don't know, is this a big ticket item or a small ticket item? Is this going to be a long deployment or a small deployment, a short sales cycle or a long sales cycle? You completely define your sales org differently. So all these downstream implications. So what can I do in a situation like that is I can outsource different demand generation functions, different demand generation styles, different messaging, isolate down on all the different variables that I'm looking to test, and determine to only bring in-house those that financially make sense or or make sense from a knowledge, meaning we need to own this core competency, but we don't need to own the execution of it or this other competency. And on the flip side, even if I did have that, how can I flex? How can I flex up or down at a much faster rate than going through my normal hiring processes and making investments and building ROIs and business cases than say, let's prove it. We're entering a new market. We're trying a new thing. So I'm a huge believer, as I mentioned, the same way as you all, and it sounds like it's served. I do it in the personal front. You've done it in the technology front, and we've both found ourselves here on this conversation. So amazing.
If only there were a marketplace where you could purchase such services.
If only. No, I think you guys are onto something very big as a movement. Right, there you go. Get that plug. I love it.
But for Creatio, and we love it too, Andy. Yeah, for
I'm
Creatio,
sure.
how long have you guys been around?
Oh, the company's been around for quite a long time. Depending on how you view it here, as many as 18 years. Now, we haven't been in all of our markets as long. So we're a global company. We've got 5 offices around the world. We're headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. I joined the company a little over a year ago as part of building out and our kind of massive growth and commitment to the Americas market. But we started as an organization in Europe. So when it's kind of the opposite journey of some software companies that start here in the U.S. and then expand globally. We started in Europe and are expanding here. So this is the newer frontier for us, but it's one of the largest software markets in the world. So we're absolutely committed to growing this exponentially and as rapidly as possible. So given that we have a really strong presence, we have great analyst engagement, 5 Gartner quadrants, 7 Forrester waves. So I want to help get the word out, I think, on maybe the best kept secret for some markets that you may be reaching with this podcast.
Nice. Well, we definitely will try our best to get the word out. And if you were right now to give an elevator pitch about what Creatio does, Andy, how would you give that to the listeners that are listening to our podcast?
Sure. As I mentioned, I unpacked a much longer version of this in the elevator style. This is really about helping organizations be very agile in this digital transformation age and enable their capabilities to, we say our vision is to create a world where anyone can take their business ideas and put them into reality in minutes. And so that's really our objective. Now, whether that be on a functional challenge like CRM or whether it be something completely different that I mentioned, that's quite all right. We've built a number of accelerators to help solve those real business pains and challenges and position our customers to be, frankly, the innovative ones of the future.
Fantastic. Well, that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much, Andy, for your time and for talking to and wanting to be a guest at the Mangtas Nation podcast. And we've learned a lot from this session. Of course, it's great to have a buddy in the no code revolution.
We're banking on it, and we're banking on it. I mean, our platform is growing quickly. Our user base is growing. So it's helped us so far. Now we're really testing its limits, right? At what stage do we need to kind of, how can we configure it further to make sure it's capable to support the scale that we're after? So that will be the next
Amazing.
test.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And if we can be of any assistance in that journey, you please let me know. We'll make it happen. But I really appreciate you having us on today.